Welcome back to episode 146 of Tall Boy Radio. We've got a bit of a treat for you this week, but before we get to that, let's get the usual business out of the way and introduce the host, because there's only one of them tonight. I'm afraid there's no Andy again. Gaza?
Evening, guys. Good to be back. I missed last week due to some sort of work commitments and so on, so really looking forward to this. Been looking forward to this pretty much since we booked our guest. I'm not going to give too much away, but really looking forward to just chatting to him. And for my first beverage tonight, if you can see, I'm back on the old Select, which is 6.6% of absolute pure goodness. And when that goes, I always say if it goes, but when it, that's a Figgy Pop, which is, I think, about 7.3% IPA. So looking forward to that.
Nice one. Well, in 146 episodes of Tall Boy Radio, we've only ever once drank the same beer by accident. And it's still only once. I'm drinking the Northern Monk.
Nice.
Death Star Episode 3, which is a Dulce de Leche Imperial Stout at 10.5%.
Oh.
And it is a beauty. It's as smooth as you like. Speaking of smooth as you like, we're joined by a guest from over the pond, a chap by the name of Vic Ferrari, who you may be familiar with if you like to read. Do you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello, boys, and thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it. My name is Vic Ferrari. I'm a retired member of the New York City Police Department. I did 20 years with the NYPD, and after I retired, I got into writing a series of books behind the scenes of what goes on, and they're humorous books because it's loaded with interesting criminals and colorful characters I worked with during my 20 years in law enforcement.
Absolutely. I have one of them here in front of me that I ordered, and you can pick yours up from Amazon as well. So I don't think this was your first book, but I think so. I think this was this your first one that you did about the NYPD? So Through the Looking Glass, NYPD Through the Looking Glass. Yeah, I've given it a bit of a go. Yeah, really enjoyable read, and it's that kind of book that you can pick up and you can dip into, which is just the kind of reading that I do like to enjoy. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your time with the NYPD and the sort of departments you found yourself working in?
Sure. So I'm a Bronx kid, born and raised in New York City, grew up in the Bronx, lower middle class family. By the age of 5, I knew I wanted to be a New York City police officer and later detective. When I was a little boy, my mother used to take me to the movies on Saturday, and around the corner from the police station, around the corner from the movie theater was the police station. So I used to run up to the police cars and look in the window and look at the hats. Then I used to watch the cops walking in front of the precinct in their uniforms, and every little boy gets fixated on that gun. I'm saying to myself, I want one of those. By the age of 10, my friends and I used to sneak into the local post office and steal FBI wanted posters off the wall. So I grabbed a wanted poster for some guy wanted across the country. You know, some guy wanted for a bank robbery in Kansas City, and then we'd be in the local deli, and I'd be looking at some poor, telephone repairman getting a sandwich, and me and my friends like, this could be that fucker right here. So I always knew what I wanted to do. By 20, I took the exam. By 21, I was in the police academy. Like I said, I worked 20 years there. I worked out of 20 years, 15 of which I was in plainclothes. I worked in a DUI unit. I worked in a plainclothes street crime unit where it's robberies in progress, burglaries in progress, pickpockets. I worked in Manhattan North Narcotics, which was like the circus. I wasn't an undercover per se, but I did make buys occasionally. And my last 10 years, I was a detective in the NYPD's auto crime division. So anything with stolen vehicles, chop shops, mafia-owned businesses, exporting stolen vehicles out of the country, changing vehicle identification numbers on stolen cars for resale, identity theft. And that's where I spent my last 10 years.
Wow.
That's a career, isn't it, Gaza?
That literally, I'm just thinking there, wow, like, the characters, good and bad, that you must have come. I mean, we could probably do a whole host of episodes just on the stories that you've got. You've probably got so many stories, but yeah, what a career! What a career that is.
I'm incredibly lucky because I'm one of the rare, people that knew what I wanted to do early on, got the job, and it was everything I thought it was going to be and more.
Yeah.
Some people, you wish for something and then you're like, oh shit, why did I even get myself involved in this? Right. But I got into something that it was like a fish to water. And I was very lucky. I retired young. I did my 20 years in New York. If you do 20 years, you get a pension and you can retire. And, after 20, like I say in one of my books, a 20-year career with the New York City Police Department is like a merry-go-round. You have your ups, you have your downs, but you got to know when to get off that ride. Because if you stay on that ride too long, you're going to lose your usefulness, and then Seabiscuit's going to throw you on your head.
So there was nothing else then that you wanted to do in your mind. You were going to be, it was NYPD and nothing else.
No, my parents wanted to kill me because my parents wanted me to go to college, and I wanted none of it. And when I graduated high school, there was a gap of like 2 or 3 years before I could become a policeman. And my parents struggled, like they wanted me to become an electrician. My father said, you could be a policeman, but learn a trade that you can fall back on, because if this doesn't work out, you're going to be 20-something years old and screwed. And it was like that movie, Catch Me If You Can. So I would leave the house every day and get a different job, and then come back with another job. Like I delivered pizza. I unloaded trucks for UPS. I cleaned airplanes at the airport. Like just these menial jobs. I unloaded trucks for UPS. I could go on and on and on. And my father wanted to kill me. But he said, as long as you're working and you're bringing in money and you can support yourself, I'm fine with it. You can live here. He says, but the moment you stop working, I'm going to kick your ass out of the house.
That's fair enough, isn't it? Yeah.
So when you were sort of growing up and you thought NYPD, was there a department that you wanted to get specifically into, or was it something that you just sort of fell into? Obviously, you mentioned the narcotics and then the auto crime and stuff. Was there one area that you wanted to get to that you never quite got to, or did you fulfill all of your dreams as such?
Well, first and foremost, yes, it was always the NYPD, because growing up in New York, it was all the police shows about the NYPD. So that was, I didn't want to be a policeman somewhere else. In my neighborhood, there were more car thieves per capita in my neighborhood probably than anywhere else in the United States. And I worked in a gas station as a kid, and these fucking guys were always rolling in with stolen cars, with the broken steering columns or a lock hanging out. So I knew what to look for. I was leaps and bounds. When I hit the street, I was always the guy, even in uniform, getting in car chases and locking up people for stolen cars. So I wanted to go to the auto crime division. But in the NYPD, there is a lot of nepotism. So if your last name is the same as a chief or an inspector, you're going to go wherever you want. I mean, there's guys, they literally do very little street time because their dad is an upper echelon member of the department. So if they want to go to aviation or mounted or drive around in a boat, they're going to go there with little experience. The auto crime division at one time was one of the most difficult places to go to. And I remember I went to a training course. I had like 3 years in, and there was this fat bastard from auto crime teaching us, our instructor. And I was young and naive and stupid. And he goes, does anybody here want to work in the auto crime division? So like I raised my hand, and he goes, officer, he goes, is your father above the rank of captain? I said, no, sir. He says, put your hand down. You're never going to get here. And I said, fuck him. I said, I am going to get in here. And I just kept making stolen car arrests and I kept getting good evaluations, and I just did the work. Because, my dad was a butcher. I had no family in the police department. So I gravitated to the stolen vehicle industry, and that I landed exactly where I wanted to go.
Wow. That's an amazing sort of story, isn't it? To say that you wanted to get somewhere, and didn't matter effectively how many hurdles or barriers were put in front of you, you actually got to where you wanted to be. That's incredible.
Yeah,
it's a lot of luck. It is hard work, but it was a little luck too.
Yeah.
So when you were looking at that and you were watching the stuff on TV, I've got a feeling I know the answer to this question, but how close is being a New York City cop to the stuff that we saw on, NYPD Blue and things like that? Is it close?
No, yes and no. Like, okay, so way back in the good old bad days, Like when I first got hired, it was a lot different than it is now. Now the department is very politically correct. Yes and no. So on television shows, everything gets wrapped up in an hour. The closest television show that gets it right is Law and Order, because there's a crime, right? The show always opens up, there's a crime. The detectives are called, and it shows how the detectives narrow out suspects. They bring evidence to the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office tells them, bring us back more. They make the arrest. Then it goes to trial, and then it gets wrapped up in an hour, and they cut a lot of corners. But I would say Law and Order is the closest thing. But no, like on TV shows and stuff, like if you get involved in a shooting or something, it's like you're not going home and having a beer that night. Like they drag you to the fucking ringer. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's totally different in that aspect. Like you're not going around wrecking cars. And then they're like, just take a day off and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Like, yeah, bullshit. You know what I mean? You wreck a couple of cars, you know, you're going to be stuck in the station house for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine.
one of the things that I'm sort of desperate to ask is when you first went through the academy and you first got your stripes, was there a moment where you went, what the fuck, sort of thing, and you were like, you're like, what is this?
All right, so get this. So again, I grew up in the Bronx, right? The Bronx is a pretty large place, but I grew up in the Bronx, lower middle class neighborhood, right? I get out of the police academy, I go to a field training unit in the South Bronx. So, you know, you guys are old enough to remember they used to show videos of the Bronx burning and stuff. So by the time they used to call my precinct in that area Fort Apache, by the time I got there, they were calling it Little House on the Prairie because it was all fucking burned out. But what you had going on was I got hired right in the middle of the crack epidemic. So yes, like I remember my first day out of the police academy, they put me in field training and they dropped me off on a block where there was rows, 30 or 40, 6-story abandoned buildings, and just said, figure it out, kid. And I'm on foot by myself with a radio. And there's fucking crackheads walking by with like shit they stole, like trying to sell it, pimps and hoes. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like this isn't what I envisioned, man. Like people coming up to me speaking Spanish, asking me questions. Like, yeah, I had like remedial Spanish in like 6th grade. I don't know what the fuck they were talking about. So it all came to get, because a couple of times early on, I'm like, what the fuck did I get myself involved in? You know what I mean? Like, this is nothing. You know what I mean? Like the drug dealers would fuck with you on a corner. I tell a story in my book, The NYPD's Flying Circus. I had a friend, when he was in field training, they put him on a foot post in a high drug prone location. So he's out there by himself and he's running people off the corner, get out of here, don't sell drugs, pushing people, you know, getting off the corner and stuff, keeping the block clean. So he's standing with his back up against the building and he looks at his watch and he goes, okay, it's noon. I'm going to go take my meal hour. He takes that step off the building and he hears something go meow and hears an explosion. Someone threw a cat off the 6-story building and it almost fucking hit him. The cat exploded all over him, right? He's a rookie cop. He panics. He gets on the radio. He calls what's called a 1013, which means officer needs assistance. And I don't know how it is in London or England. You get on that radio and call a 1013, the fucking cavalry's coming, man. It's like something you've never seen before. 50, 60 cops show up and he's standing there pointing at a dead cat and the sergeant's like, come here. He goes, do I bother you? And he goes, no. He goes, then why are you bothering me? He goes, call fucking sanitation and clean up this mess and stop bothering me. Like, that was, and he's like, yeah, but the cat. He goes, what the fuck, fucking cat? Did it hit you? No. He goes, get over it.
What a great story that is.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, it's a different world, isn't it? Dealing with the kind of people then that you dealt with in the Bronx, the South Bronx, and all over the 5 boroughs, did it leave you with a cynical view of people?
You know, I think I was cynical before I got hired, but like I say in one of my books, I mean, growing up in the Bronx, throwing my mother in a 20-year career with the New York City Police Department, it's a wonder I talk to anybody. Yeah, you can. It does. It's a unique job. And if you let it get to you, it will eat you alive. It's almost like being a lion tamer, or, you know, if you let your guard down or you really think about it too much, like people that work on high buildings, like the steeplejacks guys that do construction. It's like, if you really start thinking about how crazy this is, I'm guessing it could fuck you up. I guess I'm not that much of a deep thinker. So luckily for me, I'm able to compartmentalize things, because it does happen to people where they either suffer mental illness or they become very bitter people, and they're just, we call them hair bags in the department. It's like a salty veteran that's like, yeah, the world sucks, and it's what do you got, kid? Like they drive around in the same precinct in circles for 20 years, and it just burns them out. You can't let it get to them.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it's a whole different experience, isn't it, Gaza?
I just can't. Obviously, myself and Adam, we've got jobs and professions, but we've come across a couple of sort of colourful characters, but nothing even remotely that I can imagine that you've come across. One of the things I wanted to ask, really, and we might get onto your book in a second, but was it something growing up in terms of when you got in? At what point did you then start to think, actually, I might start writing? And did you have that in mind when you're in the NYPD, and therefore you were effectively making mental notes, or that might be quite a good story to tell, or was it just something afterwards that you left?
Well, no, I never had any intention of writing books. Right. I went to high school. I never took a creative writing course or a journalism course. I retired from the NYPD. I moved to Florida, and I was bored. So I became a police officer again for a small police department in Florida. But here's the thing. So I went from working as a detective in America's largest police department to this tiny little department in Florida. And it was almost like having a stroke and having to learn everything all over again. Yeah, like I knew, he breaks the window, I put handcuffs on him, but the paperwork is different. The policies are different. And down in Florida, it was so different. Like we spent like a half a day learning how to wrestle alligators. I'm like, what the fuck? Alligators? Like, I have alligators up in the Bronx. Like, yeah, don't worry. Every police car's got a roll of duct tape in the trunk. I'm like, can't we just shoot these fucking things? Yeah, shoot them. So it was totally different down here. So I did that for like 8 months, and I was like, no, thank you. So I resigned, and then I was bored again. And my friends and family were like, you got all these crazy stories. You've got almost a photographic mind. Whenever, we're out, there's always some story that bubbles up. You should start writing this stuff down and write a series of books. And I said, I don't know. I was very apprehensive of doing it. It's probably the best thing I ever did, short of my NYPD career. And it allows me to live vicariously through myself again.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I can imagine. So if we look at each of your books, if I give you the title of the book, then do you want to tell us a little bit about them? So we start off then with Dickheads and Debauchery.
Dickheads and Debauchery and Other Ingenious Ways to Die is my first book. Yeah. It's got a picture of a fat guy on a ladder drinking a beer, wearing a wife beater, doing something dangerous with electricity. That book is about the ridiculous things people do to shorten their life expectancy, whether it's going to Spain to run with the Bulls. I love it when New Yorkers go to Spain to run with the Bulls. I'm like, just ride the fucking subway if you want to lose your life. It's a lot cheaper, right? Push into the tracks. You might watch a homeless person piss on the third rail and get electrocuted, which happens all the time down in the tunnel. So it's like it's just about the ridiculous things people do to shorten their life expectancy.
Wow, brilliant.
And then the Grand Theft Auto, I think I can guess what that one's about a little bit. I'm guessing it's about your time in the auto department there.
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto, the NYPD's auto crime division, is like, it's about my 10 years involved in auto theft. It's everything you wanted to know about the stolen vehicle industry. Who steals your car? What happens to your car after it gets stolen? A car thief's mindset. And then there's a bunch of interesting cases in there that I worked on, like I recovered Mike Tyson's stolen motorcycle. I worked on an international auto theft ring that was shipping 30 cars a month to China. And then the bad guys involved in that, the thieves, were in the murder for hire business. So while we were on wiretaps, these guys were bragging about whacking this guy and whacking that guy. So when we took down the case, we locked up all these car thieves and these guys exporting stolen cars to China. But then we solved like 15 homicides.
Holy shit.
So, I mean, we'll get onto the books, but in terms of that, then, I mean, were you ever sort of worried about, because the perception that we have over in England of the NYPD and maybe the LAPD and is it? This is going to sound awfully quite bad, but it's sort of almost institutionally corrupt. So, were you ever worried about repercussions, either A, from, I say, mob bosses or criminals, and were you ever sort of personally targeted or afraid, or was there ever a point where you thought, actually, what am I doing, because this might affect me personally?
Yeah, all right. So I got to unpack that because there's a couple of layers to that question. So first and foremost, the New York City Police Department has at any given time, between 35,000 and 40,000 members. So we hire in bulk. A small police academy class is 250 people. A large class could be 2,500 people.
Wow,
so
okay.
They do their best to weed out the bad apples. But when you hire in bulk, occasionally you're going to get dirtbags. And it's either people of high intelligence that are going to sit back and wait for the right opportunity and the right partner to pull something off. You got morons that just go for it. And then you get people that, for whatever reason, they're financial, something happens to them, and they slide off the deep end. In my book, The NYPD's Flying Circus, Cops, Crime, and Chaos, there's a chapter called Crossing Over to the Dark Side. And that there's a whole thing about police corruption. And if there's one thing the NYPD makes perfectly clear, like the day you raise your hand and, swear to uphold the Constitution, if you're going to fuck around and steal or do bad things, we're going to throw you in jail. Like the police academy, it was drummed into our head constantly. They would have guest speakers, cops that got fired, cops that did jail time would come in and talk to us about, you fuck around now and you'll be in an upstate New York prison for 5 years. They had district attorneys who were tasked with prosecuting police corruption come in and give like these speeches. Yeah. So they laid their cards on the table up front. Did I see police corruption? Occasionally. When I got hired, you got to remember, I got hired in 1987. We still had, and I hate to paint a whole group of people like this, and I'm not, but we still had a lot of holdovers from the Vietnam War. Guys that did a couple of tours in Nam and weren't afraid of fucking anything. And there was some of those guys that were, doing things they shouldn't have done. I worked with a guy who years later wound up transporting drugs for a cartel. So yes, we do have them from time to time. It does come up. When I was working in organized crime, we used to laugh and we'd say every time we went up on a wiretap and we were listening to some dirtbag's conversation, some cop from some department, sometimes ours, would wander onto the playing field. Be it they were running a plate for someone, like, didn't know why they were running this plate, but should have never have done it in the first place. Yeah. Or we would do, like, just before I retired, we were doing a case on a scrap metal processor where the guy was an organized crime figure. And there was a cop transporting stolen cars to this place. And this guy was involved in a lot of shit, hijackings and home invasion. So yes, it does happen. Wow. As far as the mafia, which, when I was active, New York City was the hub, right? Yeah. Because probably the largest of all, you had 5 families in there. We dealt with them all the time. And, we'd rattle their cage, they'd rattle ours. One of the sergeants in auto crime, we were doing a case on a big time organized crime figure, and he knew we were doing a case on him. And he had one of his guys steal our sergeant's street sign. And had said something to him about it. So letting him know, I know the block you live on, and I had one of my guys steal the street sign. So we did work a lot of organized crime cases. And the funny thing is, like, we knew some of these guys were capable of doing murder or capable of doing serious physical injury to people. And then when we take the case down and we start getting informants, then you find out, this guy that we've been watching for months is a fucking serial killer. You know what I mean? As far as, whacked a lot of people.
Wow. Jeez.
That's, do you know what I mean? It's just like you said, just doing a wiretap, and you're opening a whole can of worms. It's incredible. It is incredible.
It is. It just keeps, and you got to know at what point, like the case with the cars going to China, the only reason we took that case down was because they got greedy. and they stole 10 cars in one shot, and they didn't sweep the cars for GPS. So instead of letting the cars park somewhere and let them cool off, they took the 10 cars and brought them right into the garage. One of the tracking devices, like a LoJack, started pinging, and then the precinct cops, who had no idea we were doing a case in this thing, ran in, and then the Chinese would, everybody was scattering like rats on a ship, and we had to round these fuckers up in 24 hours.
Wow. It's just, wow, unbelievable.
Yeah. So we talked about that, and you mentioned Flying Circus, NYPD's Flying Circus. So the next book is obviously the one that I have here, which is oh no, it's not. Sorry, NYPD Law and Order. So that was the next book that I had in my list. So tell us a little bit about that one.
NYPD Law and Disorder is loaded with funny things that went wrong in my NYPD career. So in the opening chapter, it's called Embarrassing Moments. And like I say, every author likes to portray themselves as how smart they are, and they always save the day in the nick of time. They got the witty comeback. I got a story in there. Me and my partner driving around the Bronx. We spot these three guys in the back seat of a gypsy cab. A gypsy cab is usually just a four-door car with bogus plates on it, and some clown goes around picking up fares. It's the Bronx. And we pull over this gypsy cab. There's four guys in the back seat. There's three guys in the back seat with 4 kilos of coke. So I lock these guys up. I go into the precinct, and it's like I won the Stanley Cup. I'm walking around with the kilos. Everybody's congratulating me, high-fiving me. You're going to narcotics. The drugs go down to the lab. The bad guys go down to Bronx Central Booking. I got to go down to court that night to speak with a district attorney. So across the street from the Bronx District Attorney's office is this newly opened food court. So I go in there. I order some Italian food. I'm in my uniform. I'm like reflecting. My chest is all puffed out. This is great. And all of a sudden, I got to take a dump like nobody's business. Oh, shit. And I don't want to use the bathroom across the street in the courthouse because it's a fucking dungeon and there's never toilet paper in there. So I said, oh, wow, the food court, brand new bathroom. It's probably going to be like a cathedral in there, right? I go in. Thing is antiseptically clean. It's like no one's taking a dump in here, right? I'm like, great. I go into the stall. I take off my gun belt. I hang it on the hook, right? I drop my pants. I sit on the bowl. I'm getting ready for liftoff. And I hear the front door kick into the bathroom, and I hear like 3-4 teenagers come rushing in. So I'm like, shit. They're hitting the hand dryers. They're hitting the sinks. They're making all sorts of noise in there. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a cop, but I got my pants down and my knees taking a dump. I'm quite vulnerable, right? So all of a sudden, it's quiet. Gets eerily quiet. I'm like, did they notice a pair of legs under here? Did they leave? I'm like, I better finish up and get the fuck out of here, right? Just as I'm finishing up, right, something tells me to look up. One of the teenagers went into the next stall, got on top of the toilet. He's looking over at me now. I look up. He's staring right at me, and he's hanging over the stall wall, and he's trying to grab my gun belt. I said,
wow.
Oh, shit. So I jump up with my left hand, and I try to pull my pants up. With my right hand, I grab him around the neck, and I pull him. But when I pull him closer to my gun belt, and this little motherfucker grabs my gun belt. So I'm like, shit. With my left hand now, I let go of my pants, and it's a hockey fight because I got him around the neck, and I'm just punching him. Let go of the gun belt. Let go of the gun belt. While this is going on, his friends run into the next stall, and they grab his legs. So now it's fucking tug of war with this kid in my gun belt. Finally, he lets go, and the gun belt hits the floor. So I let go of him, and he goes flying over the wall, and it bends. You know, like those partitions, they ain't worth as shit. They're aluminum, so the fucking thing bent, right? I grab my gun belt. I pull up my pants. I snap it on. I go running out into the food court, and they're gone. And in the book, I say to myself, what was I supposed to do at this point? Get on my radio and call the fucking police? I would have been the laughing stock of the Bronx had I done that. It's like sometimes you just got to eat shit and let it go. And I kept that story to myself for 30-something years until I wrote NYPD Law and Disorder.
Oh, dude! I tell you what,
that's brilliant.
That is a good story. And if that doesn't encourage somebody out there to get on Amazon and buy some of these books, then nothing will.
I've just got visions of literally, as you said, like a hockey fight, you know, and they're just trying to grab a piece of shirt and they're just throwing big haymakers at each other.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm a righty, so I was at a disadvantage because I had him with my right, and I really wasn't like stinging him. You know what I mean?
Brilliant.
Yeah. So NYPD then through the looking glass. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Well, all my books are just loaded. They're great travel books, right? So all my books, you can just pick up. There's no beginning, middle, end. There's a chapter with a theme, and then boom, I write in 3 or 4 short stories. So NYPD Through the Looking Glass, there's a lot of funny stories in there. What do you want to hear? You want to hear Hansel? I'll tell you Hansel and Gretel. So it's the early 90s. Me and my friends, a young cop in my early 20s, we're going to bars, and there's this cop who works in another precinct who works with a guy that I know, and he's an amateur magician. So we're at the bar talking to the ladies, trying to get phone numbers. This fucking guy comes over. He's pulling flowers out of his fucking sleeve. He's pulling coins behind the ears. He's cock blocking us with magic. So I go to his partner. I go, listen, get him the fuck out of here. And he goes, Vic, I'm telling you, if this guy took his police career as serious as making balloon animals in the car, he goes, he'd be the greatest crime fighter of them all. A couple of months later, it's on a midnight, and the magician and my old partner get called out to a basement apartment, 6-story building. They go into the basement. There's 2 doors. It's a 911 call, and it just says calls for help, and it doesn't say which apartment. So they're standing there. They go to door number 1. They bang on the door. Nobody answers. So my old partner, we used to call him Cancer because he killed more people than cancer, but that's another story. Cancer goes to bang on the second door, and the magician says, what are you doing? He goes, it's late. Our radios are on. We made all this noise. This is bullshit. Let's go. And my old partner goes, no, I'm going to knock on this door. He goes, come on, I'll buy a cup of coffee, because the magician was lazy. So they leave. What they didn't know is behind door number 2, the superintendent of the building lived there, and he was selling coke out of his apartment. So he got addicted to coke, and he stopped paying his wholesaler. Well, in the drug world, when you don't pay your wholesaler, they don't send friendly reminders or cancel your cable. They're going to kill him. So the super was well aware of this, and he wasn't answering his door. So to get the guy out of his apartment, they did an old gypsy trick. They bring an attractive female with them. They knock on the door, and they put the attractive female's face in front of the peephole. So he gets wood. He's like, oh, great. He opens the door, and these 2 Yugoslavian guys push their way in, and they're pistol whipping him. Where's the money? Where's the drugs? He don't got the answers, so they shoot him in the head. They roll him up in a carpet. They take him out of door number 2, and they throw him in the fucking furnace of the building. So while he's going up like a Puerto Rican fire log, they go back into the apartment, and they're ransacking it for drugs and money, and that's when the magician and my old partner are outside. So now my old partner's going to knock on that fucking door, and you got 2 armed men and a female, right? So the 2 Albanian guys tell the female, who's in on it too, they go, listen, if those fucking cops knock on the door, let them in. Just start screaming in Yugoslavian and point through the kitchen. Lead them down the hallway, and when you get past the threshold of this bedroom, throw yourself on the floor. We'll come out. We'll shoot the cops in the head. We'll throw them in the furnace, and we'll get the fuck out of here. So they're going to go for the trifecta.
Wow.
So what winds up happening is the magician stopped my old partner from fucking knocking on the door. So about 2 weeks later, a week later, the superintendent of the building, he's missing. His family starts asking questions. They go to the detectives get involved, and they see that there's a 911 call to that apartment a week or 2 before. So they bring in my old partner and the magician, and they go, did you notice anything strange or anything? And my partner says, no. He goes, I knocked on this door, but I didn't knock on that door. He goes, but the funny thing is, when we were leaving, there was a car outside parked on a fire hydrant, and I gave it a ticket. That was the getaway car. So that car belonged to the female. The detectives brought the female in. She starts giving up everything, trying to, of course, minimize her involvement in it. Yeah. And they locked up the 2 hitmen. So what they had to go back to the building. It was like February. So they had to go back to the building and shut the fucking heat off for like 2 days, so that furnace would cool enough so they could get the guy's skull and bones out of there. So that's a story called Last Night a Magician Saved My Life.
Oh, yeah. Dude.
Wow. Can you, like, literally just a chance turn of fate, just a decision either that way or that way. You know, if they knock on that door and they go in, hey, who knows?
Oh, that's what saved my life on 9/11. I was supposed to be in court blocks from the World Trade Center. I had locked some guy up who was going to be a snitch. We were going to pull him at it. I locked him up for a couple of stolen cars. He was going to give up some information. We were going to use him as a confidential informant. And my sergeant was running late. The only reason I wasn't down at court was my sergeant was running late. Otherwise, I would have been smack in the middle of it, and who knows?
Wow. Not even bad thinking about, is it? Not even bad thinking about.
No. Wow. I was going to ask about 9/11. I was going to ask whether or not you were sort of there, or what was your, what was your sort of input, or what was the sense of A, the department, B, the city as such when that happened. And I don't want to go down a dark route. I just, were you there? Were you involved?
Yeah. I was so, I was up in the Bronx and the planes hit. They told us to get into uniform. And by 1:30, I was down there walking around, and it was wild. So the closer you got to ground zero, because of, when the buildings came down, it let go with this plume of like volcanic ash. So the closer you got to ground zero, it was like a haze, like a twilight haze, because the sunlight really was, going through the particles. It was weird. It's like a nuclear holocaust. And everything on the ground was covered in this white dust. And the one thing that I'll never forget was, as we were coming down, I think it was Broadway, I saw thousands, not hundreds, thousands of pairs of women's shoes. Because you've got all these women that worked in the financial district, Wall Street, and some even worked in the Twin Towers. When they were running to get out of there, they just took their shoes off and threw them and ran. So I'll never forget that, just seeing all those shoes. And I was down there from about 1:30 in the afternoon till about 5 o'clock in the morning. And they told us, well, we're coming back tomorrow, so go home, run your clothes through a washing machine, and be back at 5:30. And I did that for about a week. Then they pulled us out, and I worked in the auto crime division. So then when they started taking the debris out to they have an abandoned landfill that they reopened. So while they were bringing the debris out there, they had us out there, and they had pulled up hundreds of vehicles that were crushed, police cars, fire trucks, personal vehicles. They had us down there, cutting them open to make sure no one had died in there.
Wow.
That's and I guess, when we talked earlier then about like, maybe that could make you a cynical person, I guess some of the things you saw that day probably did it restore some, obviously not the original act, but some of the things that we saw sort of restored our faith in humanity.
Well, by the time that happened, I was already with the New York City Police Department 13 or 14 years. I had seen a lot. I mean, I had walked into a couple of grisly homicide scenes. I had seen quite a bit, and you learn to compartmentalize things. So it's one of those things where you say to yourself, oh shit, this is really bad, but I can't go to pieces. I got a job to do, and I'll just fight through this, and I'll get through it. And I don't suffer from nightmares from it. I mean, yeah, sure, it bothers me if a documentary comes on and stuff, but I don't particularly watch them because I was there. It's the same as like me watching police shows now. It's like, I kind of know the end and I know how it's going to turn out. Yeah. So, but I mean, it did restore my faith in humanity, just the way the city came together.
Yeah. And how long after all that happened did New York start to feel like New York again?
It took a while. It took a while because there was, for the first couple of days, I mean, so all the planes were grounded, right? So you had no air traffic going on, and we were just doing like 15, 16-hour shifts down there. So we were kind of in a bubble. But, once they started opening things up, it was people were nicer to each other. I mean, that says a lot for New York. Like, you're crossing the street, a cab driver's like, no, go ahead. Whereas normally you're risking getting your leg blown off. So, it's the city definitely came together for a while. And then it just went back to being New York.
But went back to it. I was going to ask, in terms of, I mean, just after 9/11, did the crime stop? So were the criminals a bit like, holy shit, what just happened? Or because we got the sense that it affected the whole city, just stopped. And obviously we weren't there, we weren't part of it. But, over here, we just got literally like almost like the whole city was just in mourning, went to sleep, wasn't itself. That was the sort of stories that we got over here. So I'm just curious, almost with the criminals a bit like what the fuck just happened sort of thing?
Yes.
Or were you just literally like, did they just think, I can take advantage now, and was it almost as bad sort of thing?
You got to remember, like I said, New York City's got between 30 and 40,000 members.
Yeah.
So even if we sent 5,000 cops, 10,000 cops down there, we could still run the city without a problem. Crime was down. It's funny you should say that because everybody noticed it. I'll tell you a wild story. You know, I'm a detective. A guy in my office was doing a joint case with the Drug Enforcement Agency, right? So I went with him to DEA headquarters in Manhattan, and he had to pick up some paperwork and talk to these agents. I had nothing to do with this case, but I just was along for the ride. And we were in their command center, and it was like something you'd see in like a James Bond movie. It was this really large, tremendous conference center, and there were 50, 100 cubicles of people monitoring wiretaps. So you had people sitting in cubicles with laptops, with recording devices, and from calls all over the world. You know what I mean? You know, you've got drug traffickers talk from, you know, Istanbul, you know, talking about bringing hashish into the United States. You've got Colombians. So it was just like the wildest thing I had ever seen with all these phones and different wiretaps and stuff. And I just was taking it in. You know, I was amazed. And I was talking to the DEA agents, and they were telling me, they said, when 9/11 happened, we locked down the ports, air travel. The price of drugs skyrocketed because no one could get anything into the country. So whoever was holding stuff was at a tremendous advantage. And he was explaining to me, like, a lot of people, you know, in different countries were getting whacked because they couldn't get their product in. So if I'm a drug trafficker and you're a distributor and I'm buying my drugs for you on consignment, which means I don't give you money until a certain time, and I take, a couple of 100 kilos off of you, and you're like, where's the money? And well, it's going to take me a while because I can't get my product into the United States. They're going to lob your head off and take your stuff back. So it did definitely, 9/11 not only reduced crime, but from what those agents were telling me, like, the price of drugs skyrocketed and it caused a lot of problems in the drug world.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just things you don't even think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's like just
I'll
a
tell you
different
a
world.
wild story. I'll tell you a wild story okay, so again, I wasn't involved in this case, but there was the case. The reason the guy in my office was involved in it was a drug case, but the bad guys were also stealing cars and changing the VIN numbers. You would think that they would have enough on their hands with fucking moving multi-kilos. I mean, if the DEA is involved, you're talking 50, 60, 100, 200 kilos, right? So these guys, what they were doing is do you know what cloning is? Like cloning cars?
Yeah.
So I'm in New York. I tell my cousin in San Diego, California, to take a picture of a VIN number on a brand new Mercedes. He takes that picture, and I come up with the paperwork for that car, and I clone it. I make VIN plates and VIN stickers. I go steal that same car in the United States, in New York, and I swap it. So you got two cars. One is masking a stolen vehicle here. That's why my buddy was involved in it. Anyway, they had an informant that it was a Venezuelan national, and he was providing them information with stolen cars and drugs, multi-kilos. While they're doing this case, their informant turns up on yet another wiretap. So yeah, he's helping them, but he's wheeling and dealing, right? So they're gonna kick him in the balls when they're done with him, right? So he vanishes. So now they're like, shit, did he get whacked? Or did he know that we knew he's playing both sides against the middle and he's going to go to jail? And he vanished. And they were looking for this guy all over the place. So with the New York City Police Department, at any given time, no matter where you work, they can throw you in uniform to work Times Square at New Year's Eve, parades, demonstrations, fucking riots. So this guy went missing. We forgot all about him. Months go by, and they've got us in uniform in front of the United Nations, checking vehicles before they go in. Well, who's sitting in the back seat of a car with Venezuelan diplomats? This fucking informant. So
Wow, no way.
with members of the Venezuelan government. And we're like, what the fuck? And he's looking at us and we're looking at him and we're like, what the fuck? Like, he's like, he couldn't believe why we're in uniform, detectives in front of the UN, and we can't believe he's hanging out with the, you know what I mean?
Holy hell.
Jesus.
Oh, I tell you.
So, guys that are in your book, obviously, you read your book, and you talk about various people. Are they, and you talk about like partners or ex-partners or stories or this and that. Are they real, or have you embellished various aspects of them, or literally, if one of your ex-partners or sort of was to read the book, would they go, "Oh my God, that's me," you know, or yeah?
Oh, I get phone calls all the time, like, you motherfucker, you know. I changed. Listen, when I got into writing these books, what I said was I don't want to get anybody divorced or in trouble.
Yeah.
So I changed the names, the date, the ranks, the locations. Do I embellish? Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I got to pull a character who was a pain in the ass from something else and inject him in a story. But I mean, these are all actual events. Like NYPD Through the Looking Glass, there was a guy, wasn't the brightest of people. And there's one way to get in trouble in New York City Police Department is if you lose your gun, shield, or police ID. If you lose any of those things, you're going to lose 30 vacation days and they're going to put you in year probation. So everyone's paranoid about losing those three things. So this particular cop wasn't too bright. He lived in a shitty neighborhood. He wanted to go out drinking one night. So he left his gun in the place he didn't think anybody would look, his oven. Goes out, 4 hours, 9 beers later, comes back to his apartment, a little hungry.
Oh,
He's
no.
up at 425 to make some frozen pizzas, sits on the TV, sits on his couch, starts channel surfing, and the fucking gun starts going off because the bullet, he got gunpowder and bullets. So the fucking gun starts shooting at him through the kitchen. So he's got to climb out of his fucking house on his hands and knees and call 911 on himself. They had to send our emergency service in there. And, you know, when they opened he needed a new oven, new gun, and lost 30 vacation days and got put on a year probation.
No way. I can just imagine him sitting there, what the fuck are you shooting at me? You know, just like, Jesus.
I think by the second one, I think it was a five shot 38 Chief. So probably by the second one, like the first one, you're in shock. The second one, it's like, I know what I did, and it's time to get the fuck out of here.
Funnily enough, though, that explains a lot. My cousin he was over here in February. He's a police officer in San Antonio, and he had with him his badge. Now he would show it to me, but he would not let me touch it, and that's wise because I do lose things a lot. And that explains now is why he wouldn't let me anywhere near it.
Oh, I'll tell you a funny story about that too. That just made me think of it. And when you get promoted in the NYPD, right? It's not like TV. So we promote in bulk. So you'll get the notification you're getting promoted to sergeant, detective. They promote like 200 people in one shot, and you're in a room with someone getting promoted to inspector and somebody. So what they do is you got to report to one police plaza at like 7 o'clock in the morning in your dress uniform with the white gloves. And then you've got some douchebag from the ceremonial unit who never leaves except for parades and parades and celebrations. He comes through with a fine tooth comb. You need a shave. You need a new belt. You need new shoes. Come back in 2 hours or you're not getting promoted. After you come back, you got there's like a long, people wouldn't believe this goes on. There's a long leaf table with boxes, right? And before you get promoted, you hand them your old shield. So I got a police shield, right? I'm getting promoted to detective. I'm going to get a different shield, a different number. It looks totally different, right? You hand some douchebag your shield, right? They have these special molds to make sure it fits and weighs just right. Because what guys do is they buy duplicates that look real, and they wear those in case they lose the fucking dude. They get the other one, right? So wait, it gets better. So they take your shield, right? They put it in this mold. If it don't fit, they call the supervisor. They pull you off the line, and you're not getting promoted, right? If your shield fits, they go, okay, great. And they throw the fucking thing over their shoulder in a box. And I'm like, shit, I wore this fucking thing for 10 years. Show it a little respect, man.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Man, I tell you what, This is why you need to read these stories, isn't it? This is why you need somebody to share these stories, because I don't think you necessarily believe it unless you've experienced it. So
you want to hear a good story about the drug testing policy?
Yeah.
I'll have you guys on the fucking floor. Bolted down. So this is the old days. Nowadays they test you for drugs by pulling your hair out of your head. In the old days, you had to piss in a cup, right? So I get called down before I got hired, be in a suit and tie, go to the health service division for your drug test, right? So I go down there. I don't know what to expect, right? I'm there with 100 men and women. They separate the sexes. The female go one way, we go the other way, right? 10 at a time, go into the men's room. They hand you 2 cups, 2 little plastic cups, right? You go in 10 at a time, and there's 10 urinals, right? So you stand up, you step up to the plate, right? And then 10 supervisors walk in. And like, I know you guys probably aren't in American football, but they're like right over your shoulder, like they're going to block a kick. Like you got a supervisor right over your shoulder, like on his tippy toes, right? And then I looked up, above my head is a mirror at a 45-degree angle. So if he can't see over my shoulder, he can look at the mirror and look at my cock pissing, right? So the reason they do that is they've caught people going in with prosthetic penises. Guys go in with they've caught guys with like a French's mustard bottle, plastic underneath taped under their armpit with like a tube coming out of their zipper that they can like squeeze it to make the urine come out. So full disclosure, man, I don't like pissing in front of people. So I'm standing there and I'm pushing, and I can't fill this fucking thing up. And I'm watching people coming and going with their fucking cups of gold. And I'm saying to myself, this guy's going to think I'm a drug addict because I can't pee, right? And he's like, come on, kid, hurry up. I'm pushing and pushing so hard, I let go with a fart right into his crotch, right? So he goes, you want to fucking hurry up? So I'm like, boss, I'm sorry. So he pulled me off and they filled me up with coffee. And then finally I was able to piss. But there's so many stories about that. There was a female cop. There's only one NYPD member in the history of the department that failed the drug test and kept her job. She tested positive for cocaine. And when they went to fire her, she goes, time out. I don't do drugs. I don't do cocaine. My boyfriend's a cokehead. So like,
no.
He likes blowjobs. And I swallowed. No, I'm serious. And she said that during fellatio, she swallowed a couple of loads, and that's why she tested positive for cocaine, and she kept her job.
Are you kidding? Oh man.
Well, I tell you what.
What a defense that is.
Yeah. Well, you're going to believe it, though, aren't you? You're not going to say that stuff. I don't know. Would you? I don't know.
If you think it's going to save you your job, probably, yeah.
Well, I look at it this way. You guys want interesting content, so I'll give you interesting
content. We got it. Don't you worry about
that. Go on,
Well, I was going to take him back to his last book. We covered 5 of his books. He's still got the 6th one, which is, again, has got a very, very interesting title, which is Confessions of a Catholic High School. Yeah. Do you want to tell us about that one, then?
Yeah, Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate. As you can see on the cover, there's a priest chasing a kid in a Catholic high school book uniform out of a confession booth. That really happened to me. No, I wasn't molested or anything, but I was a little wise-ass kid. And my parents were like, you're not going to public school for high school because you're a clown already. You'll be a bigger clown if you don't go to Catholic high school. So it's the best thing that we didn't go to mass, but we were Catholic, and my parents thought that was the best thing for me. And it was, because I definitely needed structure. I was a little smart ass. And it's loaded with funny stories about growing up in the Bronx and things that happened to me. There's a story in there early on. My dad's a butcher, and he works in a wholesale meat place, which was owned by the mafia. Now, I don't know this. I'm 13 years old. So on Sundays, I would go into work with him and make chopped meat and sausage and shit. And one day he tells me, do me a favor. He goes, go to the 2nd floor. And he sent me on an errand to get something. So as I'm going, I'll never forget this. I'm going up concrete stairs, and a body is bouncing down the stairs, and I'm hearing, help me. And this guy, he almost fucking hit me, comes rolling past me. And then, like, he's laying at the bottom of the stairs, and he's, like, all broken up like he's got Parkinson's. And these two big Italian guys like Carmine and Anthony are coming down the stairs laughing, right? So I'm like, what the fuck? The guy's all broken up. He's like, help me. And the two guys come, the two Italian guy goes, Vic, don't worry about him. He's an old friend of ours, right? They pick the guy up, drag him outside, and throw him in the street like a bag of garbage, right? Oh, and his mouth was all blue, but I'll get to that. So I go to my father, who's cutting meat, and I go, Dad, Anthony and Carmine just threw a guy down a fucking flight of stairs. And he goes, don't worry about that. He goes, just keep working. I said, all right. So on the way home from work, we're in the car, and I'm like, Dad, what happened? And he goes, some people never learn. I go, what do you mean? He goes, that guy's a shoplifter. They caught him stealing before. They kicked his ass. They told him never to come back. He came back. They caught him with a slab of ribs down his pants. So they brought him up to the second floor. They beat his ass. They put his hands in a vice and broke him. And then he started screaming. He was thirsty, wanted a drink of water. So they poured a can of blue paint down his throat and threw him down the stairs.
What?
So my father goes, well, today's your last day of work. And I go, why? He goes, you're 13, 14 now, whatever I was. He goes, I can't have you coming in here. You're starting to realize what's going on here. He goes, I have to work here. He says, I need a job. He goes, I don't want you around these people. And that was the last day I ever worked there.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. What a story that is.
Yeah. So I see you've written these 6 books. Is there a 7th in the pipeline anytime soon?
Yeah, as we speak. I don't have a title for it. That's what I always struggle with. I'm writing another NYPD themed book with short stories about the ridiculous things that happened to me in my career.
I say 20 years. You must have. Well, it's clear you experienced a lot, to be honest.
You know what's funny? Like, my friends will call me up. They'll read one of my books and like, you should have wrote about this guy. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Fucking ain't right. I should write about it. So I've got so many friends that, I mean, I would think, I don't know anybody that's still active in the NYPD. They're all gone now, retired. So, but I mean, there's still guys call me up all the time reminding me of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So if you, obviously, you've written 6 books, that's pretty prolific. What would be your one piece of advice to somebody who wants to sit down and get their book out there?
Yeah. So if you're a first-time writer, don't write in chronological order. You know what your book's going to be about. You know what it's themed. Pick something that's interesting and it'll be enjoyable for you, and start with that story first. You can always come around and, the beginning of the book, but pick something, because if you start with the beginning and you're like, how am I going to get there? Blah, 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 blah. It's going to paralyze you, and you're not going to go forward. You'll give up on the project. Start writing about that enjoyable thing. And when you hit writer's block or can't think of something else, go to another story. And another thing that I often do is, if I have writer's block writing a story, and that's what these podcasts are great, I feel talking about it opens things up that I can write it. So I can write it. It's like, it doesn't sound right. I read my stories out loud. I got a 120-pound Irish wolfhound roaming around here somewhere. And one of the last things I do before I send my book to an editor is I read it out loud, because sometimes it sounds good just when I write it, but when I say it out loud, it's like, no, that makes no sense whatsoever. So those would be, don't write in chronological order, and then when you're ready to send it off to an editor, read it out loud.
That's good advice. That's good.
Well, I just want to share something with you guys, because you guys are from England, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the English. It's in my book, Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate. Monty Python. So I'm 55, right? I know, I'm well aware Monty Python went off the air in like 1972 or something. But by the time the BBC started showing up in the United States, it was like the late 70s, early 80s. So here I am, like a teenage boy, like 12, 13, and we fucking couldn't get enough of them, right? So BBC America would come on Channel 13, PBS, which they're always having fucking fundraisers and want to give you a tote bag. But at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday was Monty Python's Flying Circus, right?
Brilliant.
So I'm supposed to be in bed. So what me and my brother would do is, we had a little black and white portable television set in our room, which wasn't supposed to be on. So on Sunday nights, what we would do is we would put towels on the bottom we would shut the door and put towels so the light couldn't escape, that my parents, and I would hear my father, you two fucking idiots had better not be listening to those Englishmen up there. Because we couldn't get enough of it. I mean, oh God, Faulty Towers and
Yeah.
Father Ted. And I
Yeah.
love English comedy. I think English actors are absolutely the best. Big Gary Oldman fan. Gary Oldman's in fucking movies. You don't even know he's in the movie. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
wait, that's him? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins, and I mean, I could go on and on and on. But I think the one thing about your people is when you guys decide to do something, you do it right.
Well, hopefully that's what we do with this podcast.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, we try.
yeah. Hopefully. Wow. So just then, just before we go, we try and keep things round about the hour mark, but I do have to ask you. So one of I love American true crime stories. One of my favorite guys on TV over here is a guy called Joe Kender from Homicide Hunter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know that guy, yeah. So one of the things that always bugs him, that he always says, is there are cases that are left with him that still bug him to this day, and those are the ones he didn't solve. Do you have any of those cases that you would share in your stories or not?
You know, that's not the first time someone's asked me that. In my career, I don't really have any of those. You know who you should talk to? My old partner was a homicide detective for 20 years.
Wow.
Actually, he was on a Netflix series called The Times Square Killer. He actually, he wasn't involved in that case, but he narrates it.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
And I'll see if I can set that up for you.
Yeah.
I don't, because I worked in organized crime cases, so we pretty much knew who we were going after. But I don't, unfortunately.
Oh, well, that's probably for the best, I guess. That's probably for the best. So go on then.
Yeah.
Just before we finish off then, final question. What was the best part of the job? And what was the worst part of the job?
The worst part of the job, and like I said, is the NYPD always pulls you in. You could be doing God's work. You could be chasing Osama bin Laden and Pablo Escobar. And they're within your grasp. If tomorrow is December 31st, guess what? You're going in uniform and you're standing out there with all those other douchebags bringing in the new year in Times Square. Like, they will throw you. You could be working on the most sensitive case. Too bad, pal. You're working the Thanksgiving Day parade. Oh, there's a riot. Hats and bats. That's what we call it, hats and bats, like the helmets and nightsticks. You're flying out to Brooklyn, to quell this and that. So to me, that was the worst, because you'd have an arrest. You've been working 15 hours. You come through the door to sign out at 10 o'clock at night, and here it is. There's a notification sitting on your desk. You got to be up bright and early in Coney Island at the other end of the city. The best, I just work with so many interesting and sharp individuals. I've met so many. There's a chapter in one of my books called Rubbing Elbows about all the famous people I got to meet. Oh, God. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, I spent the day with Benjamin Netanyahu, with his guys from the Shin Bet, which were like commandos in suits. That was wild. I met Columbo, the actor, Peter Falk, worked at the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and he denied who he was. He saw me pointing at him, and we're in uniform. It's the fucking St. Patrick's Day Parade. People are going by, and I'm like, that's Columbo, Peter Falk. And my partner goes, it is, right? So when traffic stopped, he's crossing the street, and I'm like, how you doing, Mr. Falk? And he goes, sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, that's him. Fucking grabbed him, and we moved him up to his car. He got a little pissed, but then he talked to us for a while. But I met so many famous people. You know what I mean? Like in Manhattan, you just bump into them.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Well, I can imagine. You got any final questions, Gaza, before we go?
Probably loads, but and hopefully we can have you on again, Vic, because I've got so many. Just
anytime.
Sort of into department stuff, and I was really interested in, and it is a conversation for another podcast, but the relationship between the NYPD and then CIA, FBI, because we always get this like, oh my God, there's like a turf war going on, and it's who's it, and I'm really curious as to does that actually happen? Is it real life, or is it just hammed up for film and all that? So, there's so many questions I could ask, like genuinely so many questions I could ask. But we're at like, I don't know, just over an hour mark already. So I might have to park that until the next time you come on, Vic, because like I've got so many questions. It's incredible.
Listen, if you want to ask, or you want to set this up for another time, it doesn't matter to me.
We'll definitely do another time. What do you think, Gaza?
Yeah, oh yeah, 100%. We need to do another. We need to. My daughter is, she loves true crime. She loves serial killers. She wants to be a detective. She wants to go either work in sort of MI5 or MI6. She did say, I want to go and work for the FBI, and I went, well, you need to be American citizen for that, so that might not work out. But we'll wait and see. But there's just so many. Yeah, it needs to be another podcast.
So how about this? So for the next time you guys have me on, I could tell you about a couple of wild homicides I was involved in. I got wild morgue stories, like going to the morgue. And
that sounds amazing. We're definitely going to do that, because my daughter was like, I want to meet this guy. This guy sounds cool. And I'm like, well, I don't know. So, we definitely need to have you on again.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Have her sit in with you.
Have her sit in maybe next time. I might have her sit next to me, because literally she'd love it. She's absolutely mad keen on real crime, true crime, and anything on Netflix, anything on Amazon. That's what she just loves it. She eats it up. So yeah, maybe next time I might get to sit in on with us.
There's no maybe. Amy, when you listen to this back, we'll get you on. Regardless what your dad says.
Yeah.
I said it's okay.
As long as I'm alive, I'll come on this show. You guys are great. It's a professionally run podcast that, like, again, I like the English. I always have. I love your humor.
Oh, we appreciate that. So before we go, I just need to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, which are, of course, Ollie's Snacks. So if you want your olives, your nuts, your pretzels, or your chocolate-covered pretzels, get along to ollies-ollies.com. And if you're based in the UK, use the promo code TallBoyRadio, all one word, all capitals, to get 20% off your order. And there you go. We've trailed it there. We'll get Vic on again. We'll hear some more of his stories. And, let's face it, we've just, I suspect, dipped our toe into the water there and heard some of the stories tonight. And they've been fantastic. Cannot tell you how much we've enjoyed and appreciated you being on and sharing them with us. It's been fantastic.
Sorry.
No, it's cool. We're just literally saying, Gaza, how much we've enjoyed it, haven't we? I can see on Gaza's face you've enjoyed it, haven't you, dude?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, the podcast is just about meeting different people, hearing their different stories, and some of the guests we have on are great. Some, you think, okay, we won't have them on again. This has been an absolute blast, and I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed listening to some of these stories. I could, I can't wait to have you on again, and we just delve a little bit deeper into the minutiae of maybe the NYPD, and I just love the whole. I've loved it. Loved the episode. I haven't laughed so much really on a podcast for ages. So really, really, really appreciate you coming on, Vic, sparing your time. Good luck in your softball a little bit later on. Fingers crossed it goes well for you. So we're rooting for you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Andy's going to be good. He missed that one. So do you want to say your goodbyes to our listeners then, Vic?
My friends across the pond, thank you for listening so much, and check out my books. Go on Amazon, look up Vic Ferrari in the book section. I got 6 books. They make great $10 stocking stuffers.
Absolutely. Solid advice. And if you aren't picking up one of those for Christmas, if you're one of our listeners, gee whiz, what are you doing? Gaza?
Just go back to what I said like a minute ago. Love the episode. Love having guests on. I can't wait for the next time. Really, really, really enjoy this episode, and let's look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. And just leave it to me to sign off and say thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Vic, for joining us and sharing your stories with us. And guys, I know you're going to be looking forward to the next episode that we have with Vic Ferrari on just as much as we are. So take care.